Oh, hello, fellow, excuse me, Earthlings. Um, welcome to Level You Playing Field. For anyone watching for the first time, when I first started at the school, when TV 23 was at the school, I pictured in my mind a baseball diamond. And it just occurred to me that everyone should get a chance at bat if they want to play in the game. And in the game of life in this country, the Constitution is supposed to be available to everybody. But that is not the case. And this is why I became an advocate, because I received the rudest kind of education a person could get. I could easily qualify for a diploma, magna cum or magna sum laude, because I have seen through experiences that have educated me some of the worst criminally liable and criminally unconstitutional processes that I could have ever conceived existed in such a small community as the city of Manchester, New Hampshire, because Manchester brags that it's the biggest city in the state, but it's also the most corrupt. And for those who have not been affected by that corruptness may disagree, and that's fine. And I hope it never happens to you. But until it happens to you, that's when you get an education you could not possibly have believed even existed in an American community. But before I begin, last week I made a terrible mistake. I referenced Alderman Osborne's recommendation for Cheryl Mitchell to run for, Alderman of Ward 5, but I said Ward 3. Ward 3 is the ward I live in, and I guess without realizing it at the time, that is what I stated as opposed to the correct ward of Alderman Osborne. My apologies to all concerned. But I will repeat myself yet again and suggest to those of you who benefited from the integrity and the constitutional mindset of Mr. Osborne that the reason he recommended Cheryl Mitchell for candidate to Ward 5 is because he had worked with her and her husband, over the years and knows of her integrity and her commitment to doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do. I want to revisit an incident that occurred at City Hall some years ago, the dismissal of Carol Johnson, who was city clerk at the time. Her nephew was caught taking money on at least 3 separate occasions from the cash drawers of the office he worked in. Carol Johnson was held accountable because her nephew had a criminal record. But despite that, he was given a position at City Hall. But what was not addressed or reported is that Leo Bernier and Matt Normand not only knew of the criminal record of Carol Johnson's nephew, but helped him study for the test to apply for the position at City Hall, as well as Leo Bernier. Leo Bernier was aware of this but was not held accountable, and Matt Normand was made city clerk. Why do I bring this up? Because it is alleged Leo Bernier is considering running for office in the city of Manchester, New Hampshire, specifically as welfare commissioner. He violated operational procedures and was never held accountable. Matt Normand violated operational procedures and was rewarded with the position of city clerk. So one has to wonder why all of this took place. Was it to have yet another perceived crony in a position of authority to help further along the personal agendas of those with whom he interacts on a daily basis, a rubber stamper of a kind? So voters of Manchester, New Hampshire, ask yourselves why. Why were these two men given the greatest latitude considering their participation in covering up and not disclosing Carol Johnson's nephew's criminal history? Why was Carol Johnson the only one made to pay? And the opinion is that they needed to get her out because she was not a rubber stamper. And was Carol Johnson aware of what was going on prior to her nephew being hired for a position at City Hall? Were they trying to help him get a job as a goodwill gesture? Either way, operational protocols were violated by not one but three individuals who were aware of Carol Johnson's nephew and his criminal past. So again, one has to ask, how come Leo Bernier and Matt Norman, who participated in hiring Carol Johnson's nephew, were never held accountable or forced out of their jobs as they did Carol Johnson? What was and is the agenda behind this contradictory matter? So when you consider voting for Leo Bernier, who is alleged to have retired and may be looking for a second retirement package as he runs for election and wins, how can he be trusted to do the right thing when it appears he has a free get-out-of-jail card regarding any further potential wrongdoing he may commit or participate in for the benefit of the very few and not the many? On another note, it would appear that City Hall continues to find ways to suppress freedom of speech here at TV 23 for certain producers who advocate against wrongdoers and wrongdoings while alleging to be acting constitutionally. We lost a beautiful studio on Commercial Street due to the illegal and unethical practices of City Hall. We were put into a building owned by City Hall and managed by a Dick Anagnos-owned agency. Muzzling is against the constitutional right of everyone. Even the rankest kind of verbiage is allowed as long as it is true and not defamatory. Yet when a producer addresses concerns and makes connections with outside sources who record and play their videos at this station, City Hall appears to want to negate the right of the producer to do so. What is it that City Hall is hiding? Why does it appear that they want to operate outside of the expected constitutional processes as much as possible and get away with it? Again, what is the agenda behind their mindsets? Freedom is supposed to be the right of everyone, including the criminal. As I repeatedly suggest, if a criminal's rights are violated during the course of an investigation, they could very well walk out of court a free person. Yet here in Manchester, New Hampshire, perceived criminal activities appear to have carte blanche to continue the violations of many of this city's citizens. How has this been allowed for so long without investigation? How far up the chain of constitutional commands does this go, from city to state to federal? Where are our protectors in all of these concerns and persistent violations of expected constitutional processes? Has the law been thrown away here in Manchester, New Hampshire? Are the rights of many of this city's citizens something to hurdle over and deny? This is the appearance, and as I have stated for more than 2 decades now, unless one is trapped between the rock and hard place of these persistent violations, it may not sound real or true to you, but it exists and exists at a mind-blowing rate of contradiction and violation. The unreported courtesy of the union leader, the unreported thanks to the courtesy of the union leader. For example, the perceived network of title entities from press to the Capitol, they appear to have completely forgotten that this is supposed to be a free country and the rights of all citizens must be complied with. The union leader sometimes touches on a story that public should know, but it doesn't touch those stories enough times to make a difference so that the community at large can become aware of something negative that is going on in their community. A few months ago, I read from a copy of the AARP Bulletin newspaper about the frauds being perpetrated by dummy companies billing Medicare for millions of dollars of unreceived medical care. The article was titled "Inside the Medicare Strike Force" by Rick Schmidt. It speaks to how an agency receives a license as a medical building company, rents space in a vacant building, but has no office set up within it. Only a mail drop, and then they lie, cheat, and steal from these medical programs and get away with it over and over and over again. Again, I ask, with the modern technology that grows more sophisticated with each passing day, how can they get away with it? What kind of protective mechanisms exist to stem the flow and or stop at the very beginning these frauds? By doing serious background checks, by tracking the level or consistent charges of a patient. Years ago, I was a patient of a physician here in Manchester, New Hampshire, just at the edge of the Bedford, New Hampshire city line. He was supposed to be treating my acute bronchial asthma condition. What he did was over-medicate me. It nearly killed me. I was so over-medicated, I blew up like a human balloon. I was given multiple asthma inhalers, seven. Prednisone on a constant basis, plus other medications for infections and pain. It was amazing. And prednisone is supposed to be a short-term medication. I was on it for 5 years. I realized at one point that if this kept up, I was going to die. The pain and the confusion regarding what to take, when to take it, how many times a day to do so were off the chart. I finally went to him for the last time and told him I would not be taking any of his prescribed medications again. He told me, "You have to." And I said, "The only thing I have to do is die. And if I do, fine." But the blinding pain and discomfort of all of these medications was punishing me in such a cruel manner, I would have rather died than continue to poison my system with all of this prescribed over-medication. When I found another respiratory physician, with their help, I only had to use 2 inhalers and 1 oral medication, singular. A far cry from the over-medication my former doctor had me on. I share these circumstances with you in the hope that it may help anyone or someone who is experiencing the fallout of over-medication. I do not suggest I know more than one's physician. What I am suggesting is that you question why, if you feel you have too many prescriptions for a certain condition, to have your doctor explain it to you. I lost almost 57 pounds by my prescription change and the life-saving positive treatment from my pulmonary physician's office. You have the right to ask your medical providers questions. Relate the effects you experience as a consequence of medication prescribed. Get a second opinion. Unfortunately, even in medicine, there are medical providers who only appear to see dollar signs from the kickbacks they receive from pharmaceutical companies. But you have the right to ask, and if he or she resents it or tries to make you feel like you do not have the right to ask, get a second or even a third opinion. Switch your medical caregiver. You have that right. I have written to the chairman of the Commerce Committee in Concord, New Hampshire, asking why workers' compensation fraud appears to be so easily attained in the state of New Hampshire and city of Manchester. I am hoping they will contact me and let me share the nightmare that a fraudulently denied workers' compensation claim can have on a once whole and well employee and the American taxpayers of this country. I also wrote to the Justice Department asking the same questions in Washington, D.C. It is my hope they will become curious enough to respond to my plea for help and understanding why it appears to be so easy to violate the constitutional rights of what is perceived as a free country. Now, the physician that I spoke about, there were 2. One was my pulmonary doctor. I'm sure that he's retired because this happened about 23 years ago. And I honestly looked like I was in my excuse me, in my second trimester of pregnancy. I was so swollen that you couldn't tell my jawline from my neckline. I was wearing size 22, 23 size clothing, and I couldn't wear anything that had a belt or a waist. I wore these straight, seamless dresses because my skin hurt from the inside out. I couldn't stand to have anything touch my skin. And as over-medicated as I was, I knew that there had to be something wrong because I had a chart on one of the cabinets in the kitchen that was as tall as the door. It was at least 4 to 5 feet high because it was an over-the-counter cabinet that reached up to the ceiling. And I had so many, I had charted so much of my medication. Some was for 2 hours, some was for 4 hours, some were for AM or PM, somewhere every 8 hours. The inhalers were the same. And I couldn't eat. I couldn't eat. I wasn't hungry. And yet I was blowing up and blowing up. And at that time, it was very early in my disability situation. And I wasn't getting food stamps. I hadn't been approved yet. I had received subsidized housing, but I was pending food stamps. And so I wasn't eating very much, but I kept blowing up and blowing up and blowing up. And I decided that if this was going to be what I had to live with for the rest of my life, excuse me, I didn't want to live anymore. And when I found Dr. Rowe and Kim Rolio of pulmonary medicine in Bedford, I don't remember exactly how that happened. I think it was when I was receiving mental health sessions at a place in that medical park, that somehow I ended up over there. And the first doctor that I went to there told me it was all in my head. But he was dismissed, and so I was given to Dr. Rowe. And Dr. Rowe just shook his head. He couldn't believe the amount of medication that I had been prescribed and that I had been taking. They had to give me a rescue inhaler treatment the very first time I went there, because I literally fell into the office. And why am I sharing this with you? This isn't about me feeling sorry for myself. This is about me feeling sorry for anybody else that has been put through this nightmare and didn't have to experience it in the first place. I'm trying to educate and prevent people from falling into that mesmerizing, only the doctor knows what's going on mentality. Because your body is telling you what it's feeling. Even the best doctor with the best intentions cannot tell you what will happen to you when you take a new prescription until it happens to you. Some people don't get a side effect. Some people do well. Other people do not. That's why when you see all of these prescription ads on television, it details all the possibilities. Or if you have a pre-existing condition that you should tell your physician, or if you have a heart condition or whatever, that this could exacerbate that existing condition. And how many ads daily are on television, especially on channel 267 and 215? All the lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies and physicians who prescribed poisonous medication or artificial body parts that were put into a human being and turned out to be ineffective and adversely affected the patient, so that they had to go back into an operating room, have all that faulty material removed from their body, and start from scratch, or not get another replacement because their body couldn't take it. That part of their body had become so damaged that it would not help recuperate that person. So this is something that, unless you've lived it and you've witnessed the attitude of some of the people in the medical community and in the by some of the people that work in the agencies that are supposed to help you during a difficult time, it's almost impossible to believe the level of callousness that lends itself to those procedures and processes, and the personal prejudices. If they're not racial, they're elitist, or they're or they think that these people are below them, so they don't have to speak to them with any kind of professional courtesy. So the reason I brought up this article again was because in my research, And in the material that I wrote to the to the to the to the chairman of the Commerce Committee in Concord and the Justice Department, I included letters that I had written to senators and other people in the community or the state. And I included the paperwork for my former landlord because I lived in a federally subsidized apartment that he forced me out of. I need to find out what protective mechanisms a citizen has when they are being supplemented by taxpayer-paid federal programs, and what choices does a federally subsidized citizen have to petition a particular agency, either locally or at the federal level, for assistance in bringing the attention that it glaringly needs to a particular landlord or property owner who violates their constitutional rights. And I'm hoping that the perceived alliances that they have forged within this community don't reach all the way to Washington, D.C. And when you think about it, when you think about all of the injustices that have been reported from TV 23, from the school, studio, to MCAM, to here, and there's been not one remedy. There is still a little 3-year-old girl without a grave marker, killed by lead paint in this city. The EPA appears to be more on the ball regarding indoor air pollution and lead paint and radon and other poisons that are on these much older properties that have been allowed to be run down by the blind eye and deaf ear of this city's inspectors. And then those apartments are filled with needy people, disabled people, refugees and immigrants that are coming here looking for a better life and thinking, oh, they're free. They become immediately shackled by the indifference of non-code compliance, of agencies that do not do their job. And their children die, or their children are become damaged to the point where scholastically they cannot excel because lead paint or indoor air contaminants have already damaged their brain at the age of 6, 7, and 8. So if you think that this is just a bunch of baloney, maybe it is because you don't live there. But many of you do live there. And many of you are frightened to make any noise because you're afraid that you'll get evicted or you'll be given a hard time or you'll be forced to move out of a dangerously non-code compliant housing situation. And all these elections that are coming up, including the presidential election, I don't understand how this whole country can be blind to the tales that are told from this city by advocates who are literally begging for justice, who are begging for the Constitution to actually work in one's community and state. How, they all the fanfare and all the media attention that is drawn to all of these candidates that come here. Some are flashes in the pan, and other ones are more persistent and consistent and actually run for the office. But you don't see any of these reporters asking the questions why this or that has been occurring for decades in this community and state haven't been remedied, haven't been updated, haven't held those accountable. So I can't help but wonder what's going to happen. Here at this station, the appearance is that City Hall is trying to stifle us even more, to muzzle us even more, to not allow certain procedures that were always available before now are no longer available. And I really wish that they would try to muzzle me, because one way or the other, I would find a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer, and I would sue the hell out of City Hall, especially Mayor Gatzis. We can't get remedy if nobody's listening, if nobody is following the rule of law. I don't know how to respect anybody that doesn't respect the rule of law. History repeats itself almost every day. People walking into a bank and threatening the life of a teller. People breaking the glass of a storefront to get in there and steal what they can. People walking by your car and looking in your car to see if you've left anything that they can break into the car and steal. The damage to cars in parking lots. There's not enough lighting in the city of Manchester. I've spoken to this concern over and over again, but now that we're getting daylight a little longer, it's hopeful. But there are too many dark streets, especially Union Street, just before Bridge Street, and after Hanover, going north. It's unbelievably dark, and the streets are so broken up now that you can't see how broken up they are because the streets are so dark. And your cars are taking a beating. On Hanover Street, just past Maple going towards Hannaford, there's a stretch of street that narrows. Once you cross the intersection of Maple headed towards Hannaford, the street narrows considerably. And it looks like broken pottery is all over the road. Deep cracks and deep holes. And you have to slow down because otherwise you could blow a tire. And the street is so overwhelmed with parked cars that sometimes one lane has to stop so another one can get by, so then they can get by. I've spoken about this street at least 3 years in a row. And I don't know why that particular section of Hanover Street was narrowed, because it's very wide past Maple going towards Elm Street until you get to Chestnut. Then it narrows because of the theater district there and the restaurants. But it's just one way. So how come? How come? There's no markers, there's no line markers on that street. So, what is the agenda of City Hall? What is it about some of the people that have all these very high $100,000 plus positions at City Hall? What is it that they do to earn their pay? Why is it that there's so many things going wrong in the city of Manchester that have not been fixed for decades? I moved here in 1983. And from 1989 forward, it has really been an eye-opening nightmare of persistent and consistent violation of many of the citizens' rights. And there doesn't seem to be any apology, no who gives a damn attitude. That's the only thing that one sees. There are a lot of good people in our city. I say that all the time. But it would appear that the people that should be at their best, that control the lives and the rights of the citizens of this community, are not doing their job. They have absolutely fallen down on the job. And when somebody like Glenn Ouellette comes along, they think because he doesn't have their kind of education that somehow he's a dodo, and he's one of the smartest men I've ever met. He researches and he looks into things. He doesn't blatantly blurt out misinformation. He makes sure that he knows what he's talking about. He gets the proof. And then he shares it with the community because the community has been told a different story. A story that does not include all of what it's supposed to include. All of what a citizen is supposed to know. Especially a citizen who goes to work every day and travels by bus or uses their car to get back and forth from work. Why is that? It's almost like there's this set in concrete slave mentality. And the only way that these people can get any pleasure is by hurting other people, by violating their rights on a constant basis. It's like a fix. It's like a narcotic. They have to have their fix every single mother-fletching day in order to function. They need to be cruel and they need to be unconstitutional in order to function as a so-called human being. This is a call-in program. If there's anybody that would like to call in, because again, I don't see the number on the screen, but the call-in number is 413-0223. And as long as you are respectful, I will listen to you whether we agree or not. But I don't understand the appearance of the callous indifference to what's going on at City Hall. And for the good people that work there, this should not offend you. But for the people that don't do the right thing, I don't think it offends them either. They could care less. Because they've been getting away with it for so long that it is normal practice. It is an everyday normal operational procedure. They check in, they're not concerned about anything. Because they're in that network. They're a member. So damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And again, if you think I'm wrong, call me and tell me why. I respect my flag, my country, and my God. I respect police officers that put their lives on the line every day. And those that disrespect the uniform, that's on them. The same thing with firefighters and our military. And anybody that contributes to the betterment of life in one's community and country. We have long-distance truck drivers, men and women, that even in the worst storms, they're out there doing their job, risking their lives. You have the mail carriers that no matter how they drive to their locations, once they get to a location, they have to get out carrying a very heavy bag and distribute mail in that particular section until they go back to their truck, pull up to a new section, and begin the routine again. The UPS and the FedEx people, taxi drivers that risk their safety to provide service during snowstorms for people who need to get from point A to point B. All of these people that contribute, the invisibility of them, I find very visible because I've partaken of some of those services. And I've been benefited by emergency medical assistance many times. And all they see is a person in need of help. And if they have any prejudices, it doesn't show. And they get me to the hospital and get other people to where they got to go. These are hard-working, honest people. And it would seem that these cliches of the little people, there's nothing little about people who go to work every day and act responsibly. They're the backbone of this country. They're the ones who go in and do all the jobs that connect to the next level of whatever that job consists of to achieve a goal at the end of the day. The people that deliver groceries or baked goods or prescriptions for people who are disabled. The people who prepare food in a positive manner. The people who shovel the snow. All of these people are human beings. They're fellow human beings who provide a service that helps other human beings get from point A to point B or receive whatever they need for that day. The people that fix wiring when they come down in the absolutely freezing cold, they're up there on the poles doing the job that needs doing. And yet, a certain segment of our community, they appear to have this attitude that those are the insignificant people. They get their hands dirty, so, we don't want any part of that. And they, again, like I said, are the backbone of every community that has these hardworking people in it because they keep the motor running. They keep the engine greased, the engine of life, the engine of everyday expectation of certain procedures and processes that people look automatically forward to every single day. Turning on your light switch. Where would you be if you were out of electricity? Or the phone? Or the elevator and you're stuck on the 13th floor? The maintenance people of our world and our community are some of the most important people because they keep things running, they keep things sanitary, they keep things clean. And yet, that's how some people look at that. And yet it's one of the most important positions of any living environment. You wouldn't go into a restaurant with dirty tables and dirty dishes on the counter, would you? Or the place looking absolutely like a greasy spoon, would you? And yet there are places that exist like that and people do go in. But for the most part, the people that go to work every day, whether they like their job or not, and they do a good day's work, they are the people that keep our country going. And sometimes they're the least appreciated. Most people don't even want to be appreciated because they have this self-respect. They know that what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing, and that's good enough. And the people that have this attitude that somehow they managed to walk on water when only Christ did that, their attitude is that they walk on water. So they can do anything they feel like it. They can impose any any unconstitutional act on whomever they choose, whenever they choose. The fact that a person can go to Concord, New Hampshire, and register themselves, pay for the license to operate a human rental property, as opposed to a rental property for, let's say, storing your car. What kind of background checks are implemented to make sure that this person does not have a criminal record or has a bad history of being a very bad landlord or property owner? How do all of these people, including the story that I spoke to you about inside the medical strike force of the AARP, where they are prosecuting crooks who have stolen, and at this time, this is when it was in November of last year, it might be even higher, 60 billion American taxpayer dollars were on Medicare fraud. And somehow these people, she got 5 million, he got 9 million, he got 25 million, she got 53 million. Anglo-Saxon, Caucasian, Latin, male and female. So how did they get away with that? How is it that the Medicare system is set up so that anybody can just get a license to operate as a billing company for medical purposes or medical expenses, and just just go crazy with overcharging or charging for services not received? The same thing, the same question I ask about property owners who become rental property owners, who take a building and turn it into a money-making machine for their personal expenditures in their personal life. And they totally violate the rights of their tenants. And then the city comes along and allows them to continue to let it happen, the city inspectors. And again, at the federal level, when a person receives federally subsidized housing and they qualify, that means that there's two types of inspectors. One is federal every year, city every 3 years. And again, as I've repeated myself over and over again, if I hadn't lived it, I would have never known about it. When I was a Navy wife and we lived in Norfolk, Virginia, my husband and I lived in a place by the sea because we're crazy about the water. And we knew nothing, our inexperience, we knew nothing about housing codes. And the windows were so badly deteriorated that some of the support system of the window frame had fallen away and the glass was exposed. And when the federal inspector came to look at our apartment, he cut his hand on the window, and he charged the landlord with code violations. And we were allowed to move from there, and we moved to a federally protected, beautiful housing complex. We had a first floor apartment with a patio swing, glass doors, and beautiful, beautiful apartment. Very well maintained property. The greenery, everything was very, very clean. And the irony is that that's when I first learned about housing and what one is supposed to expect out of housing. And as a military wife or a military family, the military protects their their own. And so he got her shut down, but she made it like a champ. She sold her property to a 7-Eleven, and a 7-Eleven was built on the property that was once a resort hotel. But it was the beginning of my education. And when I came up here, I just, it was such a jolt. It was, I guess maybe because I was a military wife, and in the military, there are certain procedures that are expected and are enacted upon. And if they're not, and a landlord or whatever situation does not comply, they get blacklisted. The military will not allow their personnel to live in or on a property that is not well maintained. At least that was our experience at the time. So what has happened to the law in Manchester, New Hampshire, on all levels? This is a persistent question that I ask. I was lucky enough to be able to qualify for school here. It was on Hanover Street. And I can't remember the name of the agency, but the man that was the head was such a dignified gentleman. And there was another man that was the teacher of the computer classes. And he was just, the only word I can use for him is elegant in his dignity and in his ability to communicate with his students. And it was one of the most positive experiences I had having moved here from Norfolk, Virginia. And then eventually, he moved on. And my teacher, I still have his phone number, but I don't think he's around anymore. But those things are like a happy memory or like a tattoo in my head, because whenever I need to think about something good, I remember people like the man that ran the school and the teacher that gave the classes, because they treated, everybody equally. And they bent over backwards. If you were having trouble assimilating whatever it is that was being taught to you, or you couldn't quite get the gist of it, they were very patient. They didn't browbeat you verbally. They took the time. They took the time to help you understand it a step at a time until it registered. So to me, that was a double blessing. There are some very, very good people in this community who try very hard every day to do the right thing. And they meet a lot of opposition. Again, I ask, what is the agenda of City Hall? And why has it cascaded upward to Concord on the political level, at the political level? Why is it that some of the men and women that I've spoken with in person have never appeared to have never lifted a finger to look into why insurance companies get away with workers' compensation fraud in the state of New Hampshire and the city of Manchester? So if it wasn't that I have such a strong faith in my Creator, I could be a criminal. I have enough rage inside of me to go out and hurt people that have hurt me, but then they would win and I would lose. So I fight with myself every day to remain as as dormant as possible. Because I lost my temper after weeks of abuse from my former landlord, I was forced to move. And nobody came to my rescue. The law did not come to my rescue. And so sometimes if you push a person hard enough and long enough, they may turn around and do something criminal or do something that will get them into trouble. And the people that deserved what they got, they walk away unscathed because they were the premeditators of this overt action, this retaliatorial self-defense mechanism that finally kicked in after being pushed around for so long that you end up in jail. And that's the one thing that I will not give them the satisfaction of, that they pushed me to that point. That's why I've written to the Justice Department in Washington, D.C., because it would appear that here at Concord, you can't find any justice. They don't seem to be interested in finding out what is going on in the city of Manchester and why it's going on, and who are the beneficiaries and what is the agenda behind what they're trying to achieve, and at what cost to the rights of the citizens of this community. Freedom of speech is exactly that. And I guess they call us freelance journalists because we do the reporting. So journalism, whether it's freelance or inexperienced or a studied reporter who doesn't do his or her job. I was thinking about when Nixon was outed for the tapes by the two reporters of, I believe it was the Washington paper, but I don't remember the paper. But anyway, the break-in that caused all of that scandal. They weren't afraid to write about it. They weren't afraid to write about it, even though it pertained to the government. And so all of this came out. And what happened to Mr. Nixon? Nothing. He didn't have to spend one day in jail because according to what I've been told, and it may be incorrect, so I qualify my remark by saying that most politicians that commit unconstitutional crimes are immune from prosecution. And I think that that's one of the biggest mistakes that has ever been allowed. A lot of these politicians who have committed unconstitutional crimes or even contributed to the death of other human beings abroad and in our country, like Donald Rumsfeld, who lifted the ban on aspartame. And he's walking around a free man. And he received a $12 million bonus for doing so when he sold his company to Monsanto. And now Monsanto is trying to get away with not being held responsible for any illness or death that their production of seeds and other food contaminants cause human beings across the planet. And according to what Glenn Ouellette reported, it was snuck under by another bill because a budget had to pass. First of all, why is it that if there's not a full house of whatever, Congress or the Senate, is the bill allowed to be voted on when everybody's not there to vote on it? And why is something snuck in? How can you do that? How is that achieved? How can you sneak something in under the wire? and somehow it gets counted in with the vote of the first article or the first whatever that's being presented for a vote. How does that work? Why does it work? And when will somebody put a stop to it? We're supposed to be the greatest nation on the planet. But I don't think that's the case, and hasn't been the case for the last couple of centuries. And the only difference is that because the internet came along and electronic communication has literally just, exploded in our world, we would still be more victimized than we are already. And all these little cartels of membership in their secret societies and their secret meetings would still be going on, less known. So if you value your Constitution at all, don't take anything for granted, including what I say. Check it out for yourself. And just remember that there are sons and daughters of this country from all walks of life, all nationalities, all skin colors, all sexual preferences, defending this country as we speak, putting their lives on the line so we can stay free. But the battle should begin on the home front by our own processes, but does not appear to be the case. So please remember, ladies and gentlemen, that freedom isn't free. And so long until next time.